Welcome, welcome to another peaceful journey through history. Tonight we're going to slow down, way down, and step into the quiet, contemplative world of medieval England. The year is 1347, and we're about to meet someone whose life might seem unremarkable at first glance, but whose daily routine holds a gentle beauty all its own. Take a deep breath. Let your shoulders relax, and imagine yourself settling into the most comfortable chair you've ever known. Tonight, we're visiting Brother Thomas, a scribe living in a small monastery just outside Canterbury. His world moves at the pace of a candle's flicker, each day unfolding with the same quiet rhythm that has comforted countless souls before him. Close your eyes if you'd like, or simply let your gaze soften as we drift back 7 centuries to a time when the scratch of quill on parchment was the only sound needed to change the world. One careful letter at a time. The bell tower releases its first gentle call, just as the sky begins to lighten from deep indigo to the softest grey. Brother Thomas stirs in his narrow bed, the rough wool blanket still warm around his shoulders. The dormitory is filled with the quiet breathing of 30 other monks, each lost in their own peaceful dreams. Thomas has been waking to this same bell for 15 years now, since he first arrived at the monastery as a young man of 22. He's 37 now, his dark hair showing the first whispers of silver at his temples, his hands bearing the permanent stains of ink that mark him as surely as any badge of office. He rises slowly, quietly, his bare feet finding the cold stone floor with practiced ease. The dormitory is arranged in perfect rows, each bed identical, each occupied by a man who has chosen this life of contemplation and service. Thomas moves like a shadow between the sleeping forms, gathering his simple brown habit from the wooden peg beside his bed. The fabric is soft from years of wear, mended carefully in several places where the hem has frayed or a seam has given way. He pulls it over his linen undertunic, the movement so automatic he barely thinks about it anymore. Around his waist goes the rope belt, knotted simply, practically. On his feet, the leather sandals that will carry him through another day of quiet purpose. The monastery is beginning to stir now, gentle sounds echoing through the stone corridors. Somewhere, Brother Matthew is already in the kitchen, preparing the simple morning meal. Brother Francis will be in the scriptorium, lighting the first candles and preparing for the day's work. And Brother Thomas, he has his own gentle routine to follow. He makes his way through the cloister, past the small garden where herbs grow in neat, careful rows. Rosemary and thyme, sage and lavender, their scents already beginning to warm in the early morning air. The fountain in the center of the courtyard trickles softly, its sound so constant it has become like silence itself. The scriptorium waits for him, a long, narrow room with tall windows facing east to catch the morning light. 20 wooden desks arranged in perfect rows, each one a small world unto itself. Thomas's desk is third from the left in the second row, positioned where the light falls just so, where the slight warmth from the brazier in the corner reaches without being overwhelming. He settles into his chair, a simple wooden seat worn smooth by years of patient sitting. Before him lies his desk, scarred and stained with the evidence of countless hours of careful work. To his right, a small wooden box holds his most precious possessions, his quills, his inkstones, his pumice for smoothing rough parchment, his ruler for keeping lines straight and true. The morning light is growing stronger now, filtering through the tall windows and casting gentle patterns on the stone floor. Thomas opens his wooden box, each item inside arranged with the same careful precision that marks everything in his ordered world. Today's work waits for him, as it has every day for the past 15 years, as it will tomorrow and the day after that. If you're finding peace in this gentle rhythm, Feel free to settle in deeper. Let the quiet routine of Brother Thomas carry you along. And if you'd like, you can subscribe to join us on more of these peaceful journeys through history. Brother Thomas begins each day the same way, with the careful ritual of preparing his tools. This is not rushed work, not hurried or anxious, but something to be savored, each step given its proper time and attention. First, the parchment. Today, he will be working on a psalter, a book of psalms that will eventually find its way to a small church in the countryside. The parchment before him is creamy white, smooth as silk where it has been properly prepared, with just the faintest texture that will help the ink catch and hold. He runs his fingers along the edge, checking for any rough spots that might catch his quill, any imperfections that could mar the careful letters to come. The parchment was made from lambskin, prepared by Brother William in the monastery's own workshop. First soaked in lime water, then stretched tight on wooden frames, scraped clean with curved knives until it reached this perfect smoothness. Thomas remembers learning this work as a young monk. How Brother Adrian, his teacher, would run his weathered fingers along each sheet, teaching Thomas to feel the difference between good parchment and poor, between work that would last for centuries and work that would crumble within decades. "The parchment must be like a friend to you," Brother Adrian had said in his gentle voice, his words barely above a whisper in the quiet scriptorium. "You must know its moods, its texture, how it will receive your ink, how it will hold your letters through all the years to come." Now Thomas prepares his ink, a task that requires its own careful attention. The inkstone sits before him, a small block of compressed charcoal and binding agents, created according to a recipe that has been passed down through generations of scribes. He adds just a few drops of water, working it with a small wooden stick until the mixture reaches the perfect consistency. Too thick, and the ink will blob and spread, ruining hours of careful work. Too thin, and the letters will fade, losing their crisp edges, their dignified presence on the page. Thomas tests the mixture on a small scrap of parchment, drawing a thin line, watching how the ink flows, how it settles, how it dries. Perfect. The ink will serve him well today. Next, the quills. Thomas keeps a selection of them, each one carefully prepared, each one suited for different kinds of work. For the main text, a goose quill, trimmed to a medium point that will create letters of consistent size and weight. For the decorated capitals that will begin each psalm, a finer quill cut from the wing feather of a swan, capable of the most delicate lines and flourishes. He examines each quill carefully, checking the point, testing the flexibility of the shaft. A good quill is like an extension of the scribe's hand, responding to the slightest pressure, flowing with the natural rhythm of practiced penmanship. Thomas has been preparing his own quills for so many years that the process is almost automatic. But he never rushes, never treats this preparation as mere routine. The scriptorium is filling now with the gentle sounds of other scribes beginning their work. Brother Francis, 2 desks over, is grinding his own pigments for an illuminated manuscript, the soft scraping of stone against stone, creating a peaceful rhythm. Brother Benedict, at the desk near the window, is ruling guidelines on a fresh sheet of parchment, the soft scratch of his lead point marking the spaces where letters will soon appear. Thomas rules his own guidelines now, using a thin lead point and a wooden ruler worn smooth by countless hours of use. The lines must be perfectly straight, perfectly spaced, creating the invisible framework that will support his careful lettering. Too close together, and the words will seem cramped and difficult to read. Too far apart, and the page will lose its sense of unity, its pleasing proportions. He works slowly, methodically, measuring each line with the patience of someone who has learned that haste is the enemy of beauty. The morning light is perfect now, bright enough to work by but not so harsh as to strain the eyes. This is the golden time, when the light is clear and steady, when the mind is fresh and the hand is sure. The first line is marked, then the second, then the third. Soon the entire page is prepared, waiting for the words that will give it meaning and purpose. Thomas sets aside his ruler, flexes his fingers, takes a slow, deep breath. Now the real work begins. Brother Thomas dips his quill in the prepared ink, testing it once more on his practice parchment. Watching the way the black line flows from the carefully cut point. The ink is perfect. The quill is ready. The parchment waits with patient acceptance. He begins with the first psalm, Beatus vir qui non habeat in concilio impiorum. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly. The words are familiar to him, as familiar as his own heartbeat. But each time he writes them, they seem to carry new weight, new meaning. The first letter, a magnificent B, requires special attention. This will be a decorated capital, ornate enough to mark the beginning of the psalm, but not so elaborate as to distract from the sacred words that follow. Thomas switches to his finest quill, the swan feather that responds to his slightest touch. He begins with the main stroke of the letter, a confident line that curves gracefully from top to bottom. Then the two rounded sections, each one carefully balanced, each one flowing naturally from the central spine. The letter must be both beautiful and readable, both artistic and functional. As he works, Thomas loses himself in the familiar rhythm. Each stroke requires complete attention. Each curve demands perfect control. There is no room for hurry here, no place for distraction or casual effort. The letter emerges slowly, patiently, like a flower opening in the morning sun. Around the basic form of the B, Thomas begins to add decoration. Delicate tendrils curl from the main strokes, ending in small leaves and flowers. The decoration is restrained, elegant, in keeping with the monastery's tradition of avoiding excessive ornamentation. This is not a book for a wealthy lord's library, but a working psalter for a simple church. And the decoration reflects that humble purpose. The B complete, Thomas returns to his regular quill and begins the flowing script of the psalm text. His handwriting is a thing of beauty, developed over years of patient practice, refined through thousands of hours of careful work. Each letter is perfectly formed, each word precisely spaced, each line creating a river of text that flows smoothly across the page. Beatus vir qui non habeat in concilio impiorum, et in via peccatorum, non stetit, et in cathedra pestilentiae non sedit. The Latin words flow from his quill like music, each syllable given its proper weight and rhythm. Thomas knows these words by heart, could recite them in his sleep, but seeing them appear fresh and new on the clean parchment never loses its quiet magic. The work requires complete concentration, but it is a peaceful concentration, like meditation made visible. Thomas's breathing slows to match the rhythm of his writing, his entire being focused on the simple act of forming beautiful letters, of transforming thoughts into lasting form. Other scribes work around him in the same gentle rhythm. The scratching of quills on parchment creates a soft symphony, punctuated occasionally by the quiet whisper of someone turning a page, or the almost inaudible sigh of satisfaction when a particularly difficult passage is completed successfully. Brother Francis pauses in his work on an illuminated gospel, flexing his fingers to prevent cramping. Brother Benedict stops to trim his quill, testing the point on a scrap of parchment before returning to his copying of St. Augustine. The work continues, as it has for centuries, as it will for centuries to come. Thomas completes the first verse of the psalm, then begins the second. Sed in lege Domini voluntas eius, et in lege eius meditabitur die ac nocte. The words seem to hang in the air for a moment before settling onto the parchment, becoming part of something larger than themselves, part of a tradition that stretches back to the very beginning of written language. The morning passes in this gentle rhythm, punctuated only by the distant chiming of the bell tower, marking the hours with its ancient voice. Thomas works steadily, never rushing, never forcing the pace, allowing each letter to emerge in its own perfect time. If you're still with us on this peaceful journey, feel free to let your breathing slow to match the rhythm of Brother Thomas's careful work. And if this gentle pace is bringing you comfort, perhaps share it with someone who could use a little rest tonight. In the scriptorium, silence is not empty, but full of meaning. It is a working silence, broken only by the sounds that matter. The scratch of quill on parchment, the soft rustle of pages turning, the barely audible whisper of robes against stone as a monk shifts in his chair. Brother Thomas has learned to read this silence like a language. The quality of Brother Francis's pen strokes tells him whether his colleague is working on delicate illumination or bold lettering. The rhythm of Brother Benedict's breathing reveals whether he is concentrating on a difficult passage or flowing through familiar text. This is a community united not by conversation, but by shared purpose. Each monk at his desk is both completely alone and completely connected to the others, like individual notes in a vast, slow, eternal chord. Thomas pauses in his copying to prepare fresh ink, adding another drop of water to maintain the perfect consistency. As he works the mixture with his wooden stick, he becomes aware of the light changing, subtly, gradually, as the sun moves across the sky. Soon it will be time for the midday prayers, but for now, the work continues. The psalm he is copying speaks of meditation, of the righteous man who meditates on the law day and night. Thomas finds a deep truth in these words, for what is his work but a form of meditation, a way of dwelling with sacred texts, of making them part of his very being through the slow, careful process of reproduction. Each letter he forms is an act of devotion. Each word a prayer made visible. The text flows through his mind, through his hand, onto the parchment, becoming something new while remaining eternally the same. This is the mystery of the scribe's art, to be both creative and faithful, both original and traditional. The E in ius requires special attention. The curve must be perfect, neither too rounded nor too angular. Thomas forms the letter with the same care he would give to any work of art. For that is what this is, a work of art disguised as simple copying, beauty masquerading as routine. Across the room, Brother William is working on a book of hours, a personal prayer book that will guide a nobleman through his daily devotions. His work is more elaborate than Thomas's, gold leaf catching the light, brilliant blues and reds bringing the margins alive with color, but the essence is the same careful attention, the same devotion to craft, the same patience with the slow unfolding of beauty. Thomas remembers his early days in the scriptorium, when every letter was a struggle, when his hand would cramp after an hour's work, when the gap between his intentions and his abilities seemed vast and unbridgeable. Brother Adrian had been endlessly patient, correcting without criticizing, guiding without forcing, allowing Thomas to find his own rhythm, his own voice within the ancient tradition. The letters will teach you, if you listen to them, Brother Adrian had said one afternoon. His own work paused as he watched Thomas struggle with a particularly difficult passage. Each letter has its own personality, its own preferences. Learn to work with them, not against them. And thus, 15 years later, Thomas understands what his teacher meant. The letter A wants to be round and full. The I prefers to stand straight and proud. The S likes to curve like a gentle river. Working with these natural tendencies rather than fighting them makes the writing flow like water, effortless and smooth. The monastery bell chimes the half hour, its bronze voice echoing through the stone corridors, reminding the monks of time's steady passage. But in the scriptorium, time moves differently, more slowly, more thoughtfully. Here, the only clock that matters is the gradual accumulation of letters, words, lines, pages, slowly building toward completion. Thomas completes another verse, then another. The psalm is taking shape, becoming real, transforming from memory into permanent form. Soon it will be bound with other psalms, covered in leather, sent to its destination, where it will serve priests and congregations for generations to come. But that future seems distant and abstract. What matters now is the present moment, the current letter, the word taking shape beneath his careful quill. This is the scribe's gift, the ability to be completely present in the work, to find infinity in the curve of a single letter, eternity in the space between one word and the next. The bell for sext, the midday prayer, rings across the monastery, its voice cutting gently through the concentrated silence of the scriptorium. Brother Thomas sets down his quill, careful not to let any ink drip onto his precious parchment, and joins the soft procession of monks making their way to the chapel. The transition from work to prayer is seamless, both activities sharing the same quality of focused attention, the same devotion to something larger than oneself. In the chapel, the monks arrange themselves in their familiar pattern, voices joining in the ancient melodies that have echoed through these stone walls for centuries. Thomas's voice blends with the others, not particularly beautiful on its own, but part of something beautiful, part of a harmony that transforms individual limitations into collective grace. The prayers wash over him, through him, carrying away the small tensions that accumulate during hours of precise work, refreshing his spirit for the afternoon ahead. After the service, the monks file into the refectory for their midday meal. The long wooden tables are set with simple pottery bowls, wooden spoons, cups carved from local oak. The meal itself is modest, bread baked in the monastery's own ovens, cheese made from milk provided by their small herd of cows, vegetables from the garden, all prepared with the same care and attention that marks everything in this ordered world. Brother Thomas takes his assigned place at the table, third seat from the end on the north side, the same place he has occupied for 15 years. The routine is comforting, predictable in the best possible way, freeing his mind from the need to make countless small decisions about where to sit, what to eat, how to spend his time. One of the younger monks, Brother Peter, reads aloud during the meal, his clear voice carrying the words of Saint Jerome across the quiet hall. The reading is part of the meal, nourishment for the soul to accompany nourishment for the body. Thomas listens while he eats, the familiar words creating a peaceful backdrop to the simple act of sharing food with his brothers. The bread is good today, dense and flavorful, with the slightly sour taste that comes from the natural fermentation of the dough. Thomas chews slowly, mindfully, aware of the work that went into creating this simple food. The planting and harvesting of grain, the grinding of flour, the patient work of rising and baking. Nothing here is taken for granted. Everything is received with gratitude. After the meal, there is a brief period of recreation, time for the monks to walk in the gardens, to tend to the practical needs of community life, to simply rest in preparation for the afternoon's work. Thomas chooses to walk, feeling the need to move his body after the morning's concentrated sitting, to let his eyes focus on distant objects after hours of close work. The monastery gardens are laid out in perfect geometric patterns, each section devoted to specific purposes. Here, the herb garden, where Brother Matthew grows the seasonings for the kitchen and the medicinal plants for the infirmary. There, the vegetable plots that provide fresh food for the community table. Beyond, the small orchard, where apple and pear trees are heavy with fruit that will soon be harvested and preserved for the winter months ahead. Thomas follows the gravel paths, his sandaled feet making soft, crunching sounds on the carefully maintained walkways. The afternoon sun is warm on his face, a pleasant change from the indirect light of the scriptorium. A bee works industriously among the late summer flowers, its buzzing a peaceful counterpoint to the distant sound of Brother Francis practicing his chant in the chapel. This brief interlude is necessary, a chance for the body to move, for the mind to rest, for the spirit to drink in the beauty of the created world. But Thomas finds himself looking forward to returning to his desk, to his waiting psalm, to the satisfying work of bringing ancient words to new life. The bell calls them back to work, and Thomas joins the quiet procession returning to the scriptorium. His desk waits exactly as he left it, his quill cleaned and ready, his ink prepared, his parchment patient and welcoming. He settles into his chair with a small sigh of contentment, ready to lose himself once again in the ancient dance of letters. If you're finding comfort in this gentle rhythm of work and rest, of solitude and community, you might want to let yourself drift along with Brother Thomas. And if you'd like to continue these peaceful journeys, a quiet subscription would be most welcome. The afternoon light in the scriptorium has a different quality than the morning brightness, warmer, more golden, filtered through windows that face west toward the setting sun. Brother Thomas adjusts his position slightly to take advantage of this changing illumination, angling his parchment to catch the light at just the right angle. He returns to his psalm with fresh energy, the brief break having rested his hand and cleared his mind. The text flows from his quill with renewed smoothness, each letter forming with the confidence that comes from complete familiarity with the work. This is his element, his natural habitat, the place where he functions most completely as himself. The psalm he is copying today, Psalm 1, speaks of the righteous man being like a tree planted by streams of water. Thomas finds himself meditating on this image as he writes, thinking of the monastery itself as such a tree, its roots deep in the traditions of the past, its branches reaching toward the future, its leaves, like the manuscripts created in this very room, carrying life and nourishment to distant places. Each book that leaves this scriptorium is like a seed, carrying within it the potential to create new understanding, new devotion, new connections to the divine. The psalm book he is creating will find its way to a small parish church, where it will guide priests through their daily prayers, where it will comfort the faithful in times of sorrow, where it will celebrate with them in times of joy. This knowledge gives weight to every letter, importance to every careful stroke of the quill. Thomas is not simply copying text, he is participating in something eternal, something that connects him both to the ancient authors who first composed these words and to the future readers who will find meaning in them. The work progresses steadily through the afternoon. Thomas completes the first psalm, then begins the second. Quare fremuerunt gentes? Why do the nations rage? The Latin words flow across the parchment like music made visible, each phrase given its proper rhythm and emphasis, each sentence building toward the whole. Around him, other scribes pursue their own projects with the same quiet dedication. Brother Francis has moved on to a new page in his gospel, where he will create an elaborate initial I to begin the genealogy of Christ. Brother Benedict continues his copying of Augustine, his steady rhythm unchanged since morning, like a heartbeat that never falters. The scriptorium has its own ecosystem, its own gentle rhythms and relationships. Brother William, the eldest of the scribes, serves as an unofficial advisor, available to help with difficult passages or unusual abbreviations. Brother Peter, the youngest, brings fresh eyes and enthusiastic energy to traditional techniques. And Brother Thomas, somewhere in the middle, represents the steady continuity of the craft, experienced enough to work independently, still young enough to learn and grow. The afternoon passes peacefully, marked only by the distant chiming of bells and the soft sounds of concentrated work. Thomas finds himself entering that state of flow that every craftsman knows, where the work seems to do itself, where the hand moves without conscious direction, where time becomes irrelevant and only the immediate moment exists. This is the reward of patient practice, of years spent learning the craft, of countless hours devoted to perfecting technique. The movements become automatic, freeing the mind to engage with the content, to meditate on the meaning of the words being copied, to participate fully in the spiritual dimension of the work. As the light begins to fade, Thomas reaches a natural stopping point, the end of Psalm 2, a good place to pause until tomorrow. He carefully cleans his quill, covers his inkstone to prevent it from drying out, blots the final line to ensure it is completely dry. His work area is left neat and organized, ready for the next day's labor. The afternoon's work represents progress. Several pages of careful text, each one bringing the completed book closer to reality. But Thomas takes no rushed satisfaction in this progress, feels no urgent need to hurry toward completion. The work will be finished when it is finished, each day's contribution valuable in itself, each page a small act of devotion offered without expectation of immediate reward. As the sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, the scriptorium gradually fills with long, golden shadows. The afternoon light, so perfect for detailed work, slowly gives way to the softer illumination of early evening. One by one, the scribes begin to complete their immediate tasks, cleaning their tools, organizing their work areas, preparing for the day's end. Brother Thomas carefully reviews the pages he has completed today, checking each line for errors, examining every letter for consistency and clarity. This is part of the scribe's discipline, the habit of careful self-correction that prevents small mistakes from becoming permanent flaws. A single misplaced letter, a word carelessly abbreviated, a line poorly spaced, any of these could diminish the beauty and usefulness of the finished work. Finding no errors that require immediate correction, Thomas allows himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The day's work has been good, steady, productive in the best sense of the word. 3 pages of psalm text now exist where blank parchment waited this morning. 3 pages that will outlast their creator, carrying their sacred words into a future he cannot imagine. The other scribes are completing their own daily rituals. Brother Francis carefully covers his illuminated manuscript, protecting the delicate gold leaf from dust and accidental damage. Brother Benedict secures his Augustine text, wrapping it in clean linen before placing it in the wooden chest where works in progress are stored overnight. Brother William, having finished his work on a book of hours, takes a moment to sharpen his quills for tomorrow's tasks. These small ceremonies mark the transition from work to rest, from the focused attention of craft to the broader awareness of community life. The scriptorium, so alive with concentrated activity during the day, gradually settles into evening quiet, the desks and tools waiting patiently for tomorrow's resumption of the eternal task. Thomas joins the soft procession of monks making their way to Vespers, the evening prayer that marks the official end of the working day. The chapel is filled with the same golden light that blessed the scriptorium, warm stone glowing softly in the slanted rays of the setting sun. The ancient words of the service take on special resonance in this gentle illumination. Prayers of thanksgiving, of completion, of trust in divine providence. Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace. The words of Simeon, the old man who lived to see the Christ child, speak to the satisfaction of a day well spent, of work completed according to its proper rhythm, of trust that tomorrow will bring its own opportunities for service and devotion. After Vespers comes the evening meal, simpler than the midday dinner but no less satisfying. Fresh bread again, this time with honey from the monastery's own hives, vegetables from the garden prepared with herbs that Brother Matthew has grown and dried himself. The meal is eaten in contemplative silence, each monk lost in his own thoughts, reflecting on the day's work, preparing inwardly for the night's rest. Thomas savors the simple food, aware of how perfectly it complements the day's activities. The work of copying manuscripts, demanding as it is, creates its own kind of hunger. Not just for food, but for the simple pleasures that restore the body and refresh the spirit. The warm bread, the sweet honey, the crisp vegetables, all seem to carry the essence of the monastery's ordered life, its careful attention to both spiritual and physical needs. As the meal concludes, the monks have a brief period of free time before Compline, the final prayer of the day. Some choose to read, either for study or devotion. Others take a final walk in the gardens, breathing the cool evening air, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. Still others simply sit in quiet meditation, letting the day's experiences settle into memory, preparing for the rest that will restore them for tomorrow's work. Thomas chooses to visit the library, the great repository of books that makes their daily work possible. Here, in tall wooden cases, stand the texts that serve as exemplars for the scribe's copying, carefully preserved volumes that have been handed down through generations of monks, some dating back centuries, their pages yellow with age, but their content as vital as ever. He finds the shelf containing the psalm books, running his finger along the familiar bindings, remembering other evenings when he came here seeking inspiration or guidance. Each book represents countless hours of work by scribes whose names are long forgotten, but whose labor continues to bear fruit, continues to serve the community of faith that stretches across both time and space. As the last light fades from the scriptorium windows, Brother Thomas makes his way through the monastery's stone corridors toward the chapel for Compline, the final prayer of the monastic day. The passages are lit now by the soft glow of oil lamps, their flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the ancient walls, creating an atmosphere of peace and contemplation. Compline is the most intimate of the daily prayers, the community's collective preparation for sleep, for the small death that comes each night and the resurrection that arrives with each dawn. The prayers are familiar and comforting, words that have been spoken by countless generations of monks, words that seem to hold within themselves all the accumulated peace of centuries of repetition. Into your hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit. Thomas joins his voice with his brothers, the words rising and falling in the ancient melodies that seem to emerge naturally from the stone walls themselves, as if the monastery itself were praying, breathing with the rhythm of divine worship. After Compline comes the great silence, the period from evening until the following morning when the monks maintain complete quiet, allowing the community to settle into the deep rest that will prepare them for another day of service. This silence is not empty, but full, pregnant with possibility, rich with the accumulated prayers and work of the day just ended. Thomas makes his way to the dormitory, his footsteps soundless on the stone floors, worn smooth by centuries of similar journeys. The long room is dimly lit by a single lamp near the door, its gentle glow sufficient to guide the monks to their beds without disturbing those who have already settled into sleep. He reaches his own narrow bed, the same space he has occupied for 15 years, familiar and welcoming in its simplicity. The wool blanket, coarse but warm, waits to receive him. The thin mattress, stuffed with straw and herbs from the monastery garden, offers the kind of rest that comes not from luxury, but from honest fatigue, from the satisfaction of a day spent in meaningful work. Thomas removes his sandals, places them carefully beside his bed, arranges his habit on its wooden peg. In his simple linen undergarments, he slips beneath the rough blanket, feeling the immediate warmth, the gentle embrace of approaching sleep. But sleep does not come immediately. The day's work continues to flow through his mind, the careful letters, the flowing words, the gradual emergence of sacred text from blank parchment. He sees again the psalm he completed. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, and finds in these words a description of the life he has chosen. The path he follows each day through quiet routine and patient craft. Around him, the dormitory fills with the soft sounds of sleeping men, gentle breathing, the occasional sigh or movement of someone shifting position. These sounds are not disturbing but comforting, evidence of the community that sustains each individual monk, the shared life that makes their individual vocations possible. Thomas thinks of tomorrow's work, the pages waiting to be filled, the letters yearning to be formed, the words eager to take their places in the ancient patterns of prayer and praise. But these thoughts bring no anxiety, no urgent pressure to hurry or produce. Tomorrow will bring its own rhythm, its own opportunities, its own satisfactions. The monastery settles deeper into night, the silence becoming more complete, more profound. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls, its voice a reminder of the world beyond these walls, the world that continues its own rhythms, while the monks maintain their quiet vigil of prayer and work. Thomas feels consciousness beginning to fade, the day's tensions dissolving, the boundaries between waking and sleeping growing soft and permeable. His last clear thought is of gratitude, for the work that gives his life meaning, for the community that supports his calling, for the ancient tradition that flows through him like a river, carrying the wisdom of the past toward the hope of the future. If you're still with us in this peaceful darkness, feel free to let yourself drift, to settle into the same gentle rest that embraces Brother Thomas. And if this quiet journey has brought you comfort, perhaps leave a gentle word in the comments, or share this with someone who needs a little peace tonight. In the profound silence of the monastic night, Brother Thomas sleeps the sleep of honest labor, of meaningful work completed with care and devotion. His dreams, when they come, are filled with flowing letters and gentle light, with the scratch of quill on parchment and the soft voices of his brothers at prayer. Outside the dormitory windows, the world beyond the monastery walls continues its own nocturnal rhythm. In the village, families sleep in their thatched cottages, farmers and craftsmen resting before another day of labor. In the Lord's manor house, servants bank the fires and secure the doors before seeking their own beds. Along the roads, occasional travelers find shelter in wayside inns, while merchants and pilgrims plan tomorrow's journeys by candlelight. But within the monastery walls, time moves differently, more slowly but more deliberately. The great silence that began after Compline will continue until dawn, broken only by the soft footsteps of the monk whose turn it is to tend the lamps, to ensure that the community's prayer continues even in sleep, that the sacred rhythms are maintained through all the hours of darkness. Brother Thomas stirs slightly in his sleep, perhaps responding to some distant sound, the call of a night bird or the whisper of wind through the cloister gardens. But the disturbance is minimal, brief, like a small stone dropped into still water, the ripples quickly fading back into perfect stillness. The hours pass unmarked by any clock save the gradual wheeling of stars across the narrow windows. This is the deep time of rest, when the body repairs itself from the day's labors, when the mind processes and stores the experiences of waking hours, when the spirit communes with mysteries beyond the reach of conscious thought. In his dreams, Thomas finds himself back in the scriptorium, but transformed, expanded beyond its physical dimensions. The familiar desks stretch away into infinite distance, each one occupied by a scribe from across the centuries, all working on the same eternal task, all contributing to the same endless river of sacred text. He sees Brother Adrian, his old teacher, young again and bent over a magnificent gospel, his weathered hands steady as they guide a golden eye across virgin parchment. At another desk, a monk he doesn't recognize, perhaps from centuries past, carefully copies the works of Saint Jerome, each letter formed with the same devotion Thomas brings to his own work. The dream shifts and flows like candlelight, sometimes clear, sometimes shadowy, but always peaceful, always suffused with the deep satisfaction that comes from meaningful work. Thomas sees his own psalter completed, bound in rich leather, resting on the altar of a small country church where a priest opens it for morning prayers, where the familiar words he has copied with such care now serve their intended purpose, connecting earthbound souls with eternal truths. But these are not the anxious dreams of ambition or achievement, rather the peaceful visions of work that finds its meaning in the doing rather than the completion, of service that seeks no recognition beyond the quiet satisfaction of duty fulfilled with love. The night deepens, the silence becomes more complete. The monastery settles into the profound rest that only comes to communities living in harmony with natural rhythms, rising with the sun, sleeping with the darkness, finding in this simple pattern a peace that the wider world, with all its hurry and complication, seems to have forgotten. In his cell, Brother Matthew the cook sleeps peacefully, already planning tomorrow's bread in his dreams, calculating the amounts of flour and water, imagining the way the dough will feel beneath his practiced hands. Brother Francis, his illuminated gospel covered and protected, dreams in colors, blues and golds and crimsons, dancing behind his closed eyelids like living jewels. And Brother Thomas, somewhere in the middle of the long dormitory, sleeps the deep sleep of satisfaction, of a day well spent, of work that matters, of a life lived according to principles larger than personal desire or worldly ambition. His breathing is slow and regular, his face peaceful in the dim light of the single lamp, his hands, still faintly stained with ink, resting quietly at his sides. The night passes in waves of deeper and lighter sleep, the natural rhythm that has guided human rest since the beginning of time. Brother Thomas moves through these cycles without awareness, his body and mind following patterns older than consciousness, older than civilization itself. Sometime in the deepest part of the night, he dreams of letters coming alive, of carefully formed A's walking across parchment pages like tiny pilgrims, of decorative capitals blooming into actual flowers, their illuminated vines growing and spreading until they cover entire walls with living beauty. It is a peaceful dream, gentle and slow, filled with the same quiet wonder that marks his waking hours. The monastery around him breathes with the rhythm of sleeping men, 31 souls united in rest as they are united in prayer and work. Each sleeps according to his own pattern, some deeply and without stirring, others more lightly, responding to the small sounds of night, the settling of old stones, the whisper of wind through careful gardens, the distant hoot of an owl hunting in the fields beyond the walls. Brother William, the eldest of the scribes, sleeps with the profound rest of age and experience, his weathered hands folded peacefully across his chest, his dreams perhaps filled with all the manuscripts he has created over his long years of service. Brother Peter, the youngest, sleeps with the complete abandon of youth, occasionally murmuring words from the texts he has been copying, his sleeping mind still working through the lessons of his craft. The lamp near the dormitory door burns steadily, its small flame a symbol of continuity, of the light that never goes out. the eternal flame of prayer and devotion that these men tend through all their waking and sleeping hours. The monk responsible for tending this lamp, Brother Marcus tonight, makes his quiet rounds, checking that all is well, adding oil where needed, maintaining the gentle illumination that comforts sleeping brothers and reminds them, even in dreams, that they are not alone. Outside, the natural world maintains its own rhythms. Night-blooming flowers in the monastery garden release their subtle fragrances into the cool air. Bats hunt insects among the fruit trees in the orchard. In the herb garden, night-scented stock and evening primrose add their perfumes to the gentle breeze that stirs the leaves of rosemary and thyme. These scents, carried on the night air, drift through the open windows of the dormitory, creating an atmosphere of perfect peace, of harmony between human community and natural world, of integration between sacred purpose and earthly beauty. This is the monastery at its most complete, its most perfectly realized, a place where every element, from the grandest architectural gesture to the smallest growing herb, contributes to a single vision of life lived in conscious relationship with the divine. Thomas turns slightly in his sleep, the movement natural and unconscious, his body adjusting to find the most comfortable position, the straw in his mattress, refreshed just last month with new material from the monastery's own fields, rustles softly, a sound so familiar it merges with the silence rather than breaking it. His dreams shift now to memories, gentle recollections of his early days in the monastery, of Brother Adrian's patient instruction, of the first time his letters achieved the flowing beauty he had admired in others' work, of the gradual development of confidence and skill that comes only through years of dedicated practice. He remembers the day he completed his first complete manuscript, a small prayer book for personal devotion, and the quiet pride he felt in seeing his work bound and finished, ready to serve its purpose in the world beyond these walls. Brother Adrian had examined every page, nodding with approval at the consistent letter forms, the proper spacing, the careful attention to detail that marked mature craftsmanship. "Good work, Brother Thomas," his teacher had said simply, but in those few words Thomas had heard not just approval, but welcome, acceptance into the ancient brotherhood of scribes, recognition that he had become not just a copier of texts, but a true craftsman, a keeper of the flame that passes knowledge from generation to generation. In the hour before dawn, when darkness begins its gradual retreat and the first birds stir in the monastery gardens, Brother Thomas enters the lightest phase of sleep, that gentle transition between night's rest and day's awakening. His dreams become less vivid, more like memories floating just beneath consciousness, images of flowing letters and golden light, of quiet satisfaction and meaningful work. The dormitory around him begins its own subtle preparation for the coming day. Here and there, other monks shift positions, their bodies sensing the approach of morning even in sleep. The night lamp burns lower now, its oil nearly spent. But dawn is close enough that soon natural light will replace its gentle glow. Outside the narrow windows, the sky slowly lightens from deep black to grey, then to the faintest suggestion of rose and gold. This is the daily miracle, the return of light, the promise that yesterday's work can continue, that today brings new opportunities for service and devotion, that the great wheel of prayer and labor will turn once more. Brother Thomas's breathing changes slightly, becoming less deep, more responsive to the subtle changes in light and sound that herald the coming dawn. But he does not wake, not yet, allowing himself to rest fully until the bell calls the community to prayer, trusting in the ancient rhythm that has guided monastic life for centuries. In the scriptorium, his desk waits exactly as he left it, his tools arranged in perfect order, his partially completed psalter resting beneath its protective cloth, ready to receive today's addition to its growing collection of sacred words. The room itself seems to sleep, patient and quiet, but filled with potential, ready to spring to life when the scribes return to their calling. The monastery kitchen stirs first, Brother Matthew rising before the others to begin the bread that will feed his brothers through the coming day. His movements are quiet, practiced, disturbing no one as he kindles the ovens and measures flour and water according to recipes learned through years of faithful service. The bread will be ready precisely when it is needed, not a moment sooner or later, part of the perfect timing that marks every aspect of this ordered life. In the garden, dew settles on the herbs and vegetables, each drop catching and holding the first light of dawn like tiny prisms, transforming the simple growing things into jeweled displays of natural beauty. The flowers that closed their petals against the night air begin to open, welcoming the sun, preparing to offer their colors and fragrances to another day of growth and service. This is the hour of promise, when all things prepare for renewal, when the work of yesterday becomes the foundation for today's labor, when the eternal rhythm of rest and work, darkness and light, preparation and fulfillment reveals itself as the deepest pattern of creation itself. Brother Thomas sleeps on peacefully, trustingly. His rest complete but not much longer. Soon the bell will call, his brothers will stir, another day will begin its gentle unfolding. But for now, in this perfect moment between night and day, he rests in the absolute peace that comes from a life lived according to its proper rhythm. Work done with care and devotion, community maintained through shared purpose, and trust in the ancient patterns that have guided countless souls toward meaning and fulfillment. The first birds begin their tentative songs in the orchard, testing their voices, preparing for the full chorus that will greet the rising sun. Their music drifts through the dormitory windows, not loud enough to wake the sleeping monks, but present enough to add its gentle note to the symphony of approaching dawn. If you're still resting with us in these peaceful moments before dawn, let yourself enjoy this perfect stillness, this gentle transition from night to day. And if this quiet journey has brought you peace, you might drift off or share this restful story with someone who could use a gentle night's sleep. The bronze voice of the monastery bell cuts softly through the pre-dawn silence, its tone neither urgent nor harsh, but gently insistent, calling the community of monks back from sleep to prayer, from individual rest to collective purpose. Brother Thomas stirs at the familiar sound, his body responding automatically to the call that has wakened him for 15 years, every morning, without fail, without variation. He opens his eyes to the dim grey light filtering through the dormitory windows, sees the familiar shapes of his sleeping brothers beginning to move, hears the soft rustle of straw mattresses and woolen blankets as 30 other men make the same gentle transition from sleep to waking. This is Lord's, the dawn prayer, the first formal gathering of the new day. Thomas sits up slowly, feeling the slight stiffness that comes from sleeping on a simple bed, but also the deep satisfaction that follows complete rest after meaningful work. His hands, still faintly stained with yesterday's ink, reach automatically for his habit, hanging on its wooden peg exactly where he placed it the night before. The brown wool is cool against his skin, familiar and comfortable, as much a part of his identity as his own name. He ties the rope belt with practiced movements, slips his feet into leather sandals worn smooth by years of walking these stone corridors, joins the quiet procession of monks making their way through the cloister toward the chapel. The pre-dawn air is cool and fresh, carrying the sense of dew-wet gardens, of bread already baking in the kitchen ovens, of stone walls that have absorbed and now slowly release the warmth of yesterday's sun. Thomas breathes deeply, filling his lungs with the clean air, feeling his body and mind awakening fully to the possibilities of the new day. In the chapel, the monks take their familiar places, each man settling into the spot that has been his for years, part of a pattern as regular and reliable as the movement of seasons, as the rising and setting of the sun. The ancient words of lords flow from their lips with the ease of long familiarity, prayers of praise, of thanksgiving for the night's rest, of dedication for the day's work ahead. O God, come to my assistance. O Lord, make haste to help me. The opening words of the prayer establish the tone for everything that follows, a recognition of dependence, of need for divine guidance, of trust in providence that extends beyond individual understanding or control. Thomas joins his voice with his brothers, the harmony imperfect by worldly standards, but perfect in its sincerity, its devotion, its complete lack of pretense or performance. This is prayer in its purest form, communication with the divine that seeks nothing but the opportunity to praise, to acknowledge, to offer the day's work as a gift freely given. The Psalms that follow are the same ones Thomas has been copying, will continue copying in the quiet hours of scribal work ahead. But hearing them sung in community adds dimensions that solitary copying cannot provide. The sense of shared understanding, of collective memory, of participation in something far larger than individual effort or achievement. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly. The words Thomas carefully formed with his quill yesterday now return to him through his ears, completing a circle of creation and reception, of giving and receiving, that transforms mere copying into true participation in the living tradition of faith. After Lauds comes the brief period of private prayer, time for each monk to speak individually with God, to offer personal petitions, to seek guidance for the day's particular challenges and opportunities. Thomas kneels in his familiar spot, third pew from the front on the south side, and feels the perfect silence that surrounds focused prayer. The sense of being simultaneously completely alone and completely connected to the divine presence that pervades all things. His prayer is simple, wordless mostly, an offering of availability, of willingness to serve, of gratitude for the work that gives his life meaning and the community that makes such work possible. He asks for steady hands for the day's copying, for clear eyes to see his work accurately, for patience with the slow unfolding of beauty that marks all true craftsmanship. As private prayer concludes and the monks begin to file out of the chapel, the sky outside has lightened from grey to the softest gold. The sun still hidden behind the eastern hills, but its presence felt in the gradual warming of air and stone, in the increasing definition of familiar shapes, in the promise of another day, blessed with light sufficient for the work ahead. Brother Thomas makes his way back to the dormitory, joining the quiet routine of washing and preparation that marks the transition from prayer to work. Cold water from the stone basin shocks his face fully awake. The rough linen towel removes the last traces of sleep. The simple act of combing his hair with a wooden comb becomes a small meditation on order, on preparation, on the care that should mark every aspect of life, however humble. The refectory is already prepared for the morning meal, tables set with wooden bowls, pottery cups, spoons carved from local wood by Brother Martin in his workshop behind the kitchen. The food is simple but nourishing. Porridge made from oats grown in the monastery's own fields, honey from their hives, fresh milk from cows that Brother Paul tends with the same devotion Thomas brings to his manuscripts. The meal is eaten in companionable silence, each monk focused on the simple pleasure of breaking his fast, of preparing his body for the day's labor, of receiving gratefully the fruits of collective work and shared resources. Brother Benedict reads aloud from the Rule of Saint Benedict, the ancient guidelines that govern every aspect of their common life, words that have shaped monastic communities for centuries, that continue to offer wisdom for those seeking to live purposefully, deliberately, in harmony with divine will and natural rhythm. Thomas listens while he eats, the familiar words creating a peaceful background to the simple act of nourishment. The porridge is thick and warming, sweet with honey and rich with milk, exactly what his body needs to sustain the long hours of concentrated work ahead. He eats slowly, mindfully, aware of the work that went into creating this simple food, grateful for the hands that prepared it, the land that produced it, the community that shares it. After breakfast comes the brief period of preparation before the day's work officially begins. Thomas returns to his cell to collect the few personal items he keeps there. His psalter for private prayer, a small wooden cross carved by his own hands during his novice years, a letter from his sister written 3 months ago and read so many times the parchment is soft with handling, these few possessions that connect him to the world beyond these walls while anchoring him firmly to the life he has chosen. Then to the scriptorium, where the morning light is beginning to stream through the tall eastern windows, illuminating the familiar desks, the carefully arranged tools, the waiting parchment that will receive today's contribution to the eternal work of preserving and transmitting sacred knowledge. Thomas settles into his chair with the satisfaction of a craftsman returning to his proper element, his natural habitat, the place where his skills find their fullest expression and his life its deepest meaning. The psalm he began yesterday waits for him, patient and welcoming, ready to receive today's careful additions to its growing collection of sacred words. He arranges his tools with the same care he brings to the actual work, checking his quills, testing his ink, examining his parchment for any flaws that might interfere with the day's copying. Everything is perfect, ready, waiting for the gentle magic that transforms blank space into meaningful text, that makes visible the invisible words that connect earth to heaven, human need to divine provision. The sun clears the eastern hills now, sending shafts of golden light through the scriptorium windows, illuminating the workspace with the perfect clarity that marks the best hours for detailed work. Thomas dips his quill in the prepared ink, tests it once more on his practice parchment, and begins another day's journey into the ancient dance of letters and words. Another day's participation in the endless river of tradition that flows from the distant past toward an unimaginable future. And so the rhythm begins again, the same gentle pattern that has marked Brother Thomas's days for 15 years. That will continue, God willing, for years to come. The scratch of quill on parchment, the soft breathing of concentrated work, the gradual accumulation of letters into words, words into lines, lines into pages, pages into books that will carry their sacred cargo far beyond these quiet walls. Today's psalm continues where yesterday's ended. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Words that speak to the profound mystery of religious life, the balance between awe and joy, between reverence and celebration, between the fear that comes from recognition of divine majesty and the confidence that comes from trust in divine love. Thomas forms each letter with the same care he gave to yesterday's work and will give to tomorrow's, finding in this consistency not monotony but peace, not limitation but freedom, the freedom that comes from knowing exactly what is expected, exactly how to fulfill those expectations, exactly why the work matters. Around him, his brothers pursue their own projects with the same quiet dedication. Brother Francis begins a new page in his gospel, creating an elaborate capital I that will introduce the Sermon on the Mount, his finest brushes and most precious pigments, ready to transform simple text into visual prayer. Brother Benedict continues his Augustine, steady as a heartbeat, reliable as sunrise, adding page after page to the growing manuscript with patient determination. The morning light shifts slowly across the scriptorium floor, marking the passage of time not with urgency but with gentle awareness, reminding the scribes that each moment is precious, each letter important, each word a small gift offered to the future. There is no hurry here, no pressure to produce quickly, only the deep satisfaction that comes from work done with complete attention, absolute care, perfect love. Thomas pauses in his copying to prepare fresh ink, the brief interruption welcome rather than frustrating, a chance to flex his fingers, to look up from the parchment, to see his brothers bent over their own work with the same devotion he brings to his. This is community in its purest form, not the community of constant conversation or shared entertainment, but the community of shared purpose, of mutual support in the pursuit of common goals, of individual excellence in service of collective mission. The ink prepared, Thomas returns to his psalm, "Kiss the Son, lest he be angry, and ye perish from the way." The words flow from his quill with increasing smoothness, each letter forming naturally, automatically, the result of thousands of hours of practice, of muscle memory so deep it requires no conscious thought, leaving the mind free to meditate on the meaning of the text, to participate spiritually in the words being copied. This is the gift of the scribe's craft, the ability to engage simultaneously with the physical and spiritual dimensions of sacred text, to serve as both craftsman and contemplative, to find in the simple act of copying a pathway to deeper understanding, to transformation, to union with the divine reality that the words attempt to express. The morning passes in this gentle rhythm, punctuated only by the distant chiming of bells, the soft sounds of other scribes at work, the occasional whisper of pages turning, the almost inaudible scratch of careful correction. This is time as it should be experienced, not as pressure or limitation, but as gift, as opportunity, as the medium through which meaningful work unfolds at its proper pace. As our gentle journey through Brother Thomas's world draws to its close, as the scriptorium fills with golden morning light and the day's work continues its peaceful unfolding, we find ourselves witnesses to something profound. Something that speaks to needs deeper than entertainment, hungers more fundamental than mere curiosity. In Thomas's quiet routine, in his patient craftsmanship, in his devotion to work that will outlast his own brief span of years, we glimpse a different way of being in the world, a different relationship to time, to purpose, to the meaning that emerges when life is lived according to principles larger than personal desire or immediate gratification. The psalm he copies today will be completed tomorrow, or next week, or next month. It matters little when, only that it will be completed well, with care, with love, with the kind of attention that transforms mere copying into sacred art, mere work into spiritual practice. His life may seem boring by the standards of our hurried world, routine, predictable, limited in scope and ambition. But in its very limitations we find a different kind of freedom. The freedom that comes from knowing one's place in the larger pattern, from accepting the boundaries that make meaningful choice possible, from finding infinity in the careful formation of a single letter, eternity in the space between one word and the next. The monastery bell will ring again soon, calling the brothers to their next prayer, their next meal, their next period of work or rest. And Thomas will respond, as he has for 15 years, as he will for however many years remain to him, with the same quiet faithfulness, the same gentle dedication, the same trust in the ancient rhythms that have sustained countless souls through the centuries. His story continues, but our visit must end, leaving him to his quiet work, his sacred routine, his participation in the endless river of tradition that connects past to future, that makes the ancient words present and alive, that transforms simple human craft into vehicles of transcendence. If this peaceful journey has brought you comfort, If Brother Thomas's gentle world has offered you a moment of rest from the hurried pace of modern life, then perhaps you'll remember this place, this rhythm, this possibility of finding meaning in simplicity, purpose in routine, beauty in the careful repetition of essential tasks. And if you're drifting now toward your own rest, your own peaceful sleep, then go gently, knowing that somewhere, in the quiet corners of the world, the ancient work continues. The sacred words are still being copied. The light of tradition still burns steadily, waiting to illuminate tomorrow's pages, tomorrow's possibilities, tomorrow's opportunities for service and devotion. Rest well, sleep peacefully, and remember, in your own life, in your own work, however different from Brother Thomas's it may be, the same potential exists, the same call to craft, to care, to find in faithful attention to small things a pathway to larger meaning, a connection to purposes that extend far beyond the boundaries of individual ambition, into the realm of the eternal, the lasting, the ultimately real. Sleep now, and let the gentle scratch of quill on parchment, the soft breathing of concentrated work, the quiet satisfaction of another day's faithful labor, carry you into dreams of your own, dreams of meaning, of purpose, of work that matters, of life lived according to its deepest rhythms, its most essential patterns, its most profound possibilities. And if you've found peace in this quiet story, if Brother Thomas has become a friend to your rest, then share this gift, leave a gentle word, subscribe for more journeys into history's peaceful corners, for more visits with souls who found in simple devotion to craft and community a pathway to lives of meaning, of beauty, of deep, abiding, eternal peace. The scriptorium grows quiet now, the day's work paused, the ancient words waiting patiently for tomorrow's continuation, for the endless return of light, of hope, of the sacred work that transforms ordinary moments into extraordinary meaning, ordinary lives into extraordinary gifts, ordinary sleep into extraordinary dreams of peace that passes understanding. Rest well, gentle traveler, until we meet again in history's peaceful corners, where time moves slowly, where work is prayer, where every carefully formed letter, every lovingly crafted word, every patiently completed line becomes part of the great story, the endless story, the story that includes us all.